Welcome to the Volpe Report podcast, the state's premier public affairs show dedicated to the topics that matter most to Pennsylvanians. I'm your host, Chuck Volpe. Join us now as we speak to this week's guest.
The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is sponsored by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
In keeping with our recent trend, we are going to stay national on the Volpe Report. After all, the stakes for this country and this nation are very important. Both sides would have you believe it's an existential election. And we're staying national, of course. We had our show dedicated to my meeting with President Trump when he was at the Scranton rally a couple weeks ago. We did a show with Tulsi Gabbard, the chairwoman, co-chairwoman of Trump's national transition team. The co-chair, the other co-chair we've already had on the show, Bobby Kennedy, he's the co-chair. Two former Democrats, by the way. Last week's show, we had the pleasure of interviewing Eric Trump when he was in the Scranton area for a show directly talking about his father and the election and his outlook on it. Now this week, we are keeping the bar high by having the Republican National Chairman, Michael Whatley. For the Democrats, that means the Republican National Chairman it's really a dread organization for Democrats because what really Republican National Committee is otherwise known as the RNC. Dangerous words for Democrats. Michael Whatley, before assuming the chairmanship this past year with the endorsement of former President Trump, had been their general counsel prior to that. And prior to that, he was the chairman of the North Carolina Republican Party. Michael's career in public service is exceptional. He had served as a Deputy Assistant Secretary in the United States Department of Energy in the administration of George W. Bush. In 2004, he became the Chief of Staff for United States Senator Elizabeth Dole. In 2016, he became a state leader in North Carolina for the Trump campaign for the presidency, helping the former president campaign and organize rallies in North Carolina. Mike comes from Watauga County, North Carolina. He went on to graduate from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte with a degree in history. He then went on to graduate school at Wake Forest University, earning a master's degree in religious studies, a subject we often don't get on this show. Not done, he then went on to law school at Notre Dame University, earning his Juris Doctorate degree, and continued his religious studies by earning another master's degree, this time in theology, also from the University of Notre Dame. On today's show, we will be discussing the growing tide of momentum for President Trump, as well as the growing evidence that the Democrats could lose the House and the Senate as well, which could set off a pushback on the transgressions that the Democratic progressive left has put on this country. The harm, I should say, they put on this country. For example, bringing radical progressive orthodoxy like taxing the rich and redistributing wealth. Socialism, in which government picks winners and losers based on equity and identity politics. They have crippled the fossil fuel energy industry. They've radicalized climate hysteria, prioritizing racial and gender equity and government-endorsed anti-Semitism. When Bobby Kennedy Jr. says his uncle, the late President John F. Kennedy, patron saint of the Democratic Party, and his father, the former Attorney General of the United States and former frontrunner for the Democratic presidential nomination in 1968, wouldn't recognize today's Democratic Party, there could be no greater indictment. For God's sake, they even got rid of Columbus Day for Indigenous Peoples Day. We have a lot to talk about.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial. The area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Mike, welcome to the Volpe Report.
It's good to be on with you, sir.
Well, first of all, congratulations as your ascendancy to the chairman. Is a matter of housekeeping. My audience has already heard about your wonderful credentials and resume and education, and it's been a meteoric rise. I have to confess, I've had a lot of guests in this show for 11 years. And you're the first one that has the variety of degrees, Juris Doctorate, a bachelor's in history, but it's the divinity part, like the master's in religious studies, religion from Notre Dame, then you went on to get your Juris Doctorate from Notre Dame. That's a kind of rare bird in today's secular America, so congratulations on that.
Well, I appreciate it. I think really at the end of the day, politics is about the art of helping people. And I think that, really as we have looked at moving into these different positions, RNC chair, when I was the chair of the North Carolina Republican Party, it's a combination of working to win, but you got to win for the right reasons. And that's why this election cycle is so important. We've never had a bigger divide, really, between two candidates on issues that matter for the American people, but on issues that matter for faith voters. When we talk about religious liberty, we talk about the life issues, we talk about support for Israel, really all these issues that matter for the faith community. Donald Trump is as strong as we have ever had as a president, and Kamala Harris is the most radical, anti-faith, anti-Christian, anti-family, anti-Israel candidate who's ever stood up for either party.
Well, that's a perfect segue, Mike, into, as obviously you would be aware, I don't know if our audience is, so we're going to talk about it. She had a very bad moment at one of her rallies a few days ago when, in the middle of her speech, during a pause, someone had yelled out in the crowd, Jesus is Lord. And she looks condescendingly and kind of madly and says, you're at the wrong rally. And the blowback on that, apparently Christian and Catholic voters are not something that are very high on her priority list. It was the disdain in which she said it. Like, don't you know this is America, secular America of 2024? Religion doesn't really matter so much. I thought we had a Judeo-Christian country where the founding principles of what America was based on, but apparently the Democrats don't believe in that stuff anymore, Mike.
No, look, and you look at her skipping the Alfred E. Smith dinner for Catholics. But not only that, she sent in a video that was extremely condescending, was extremely insulting to the Catholic faith across the board. And so we're seeing example after example. The day after she made those comments, President Trump was appearing at a Believers in Ballots event, in North Carolina. We've had one in Georgia. We've operated in Pennsylvania. We've done those types of events. We're very actively courting and supporting the Christian faith, and we're seeing huge leads that are moving our way from Jewish voters because of President Trump's support for the Jewish faith and the Israeli people. Look, this is a real part of where Kamala Harris comes from when she's out in San Francisco and espousing those values. Those are not American values.
Well, you're right, Mike. Is an interesting, this is kind of rhetorical. This media market covers about a third of Pennsylvania. We go as far west as Williamsport, south down into the Philly media market, right to there, and 3.5, 4 million people, about that. Very, very, very high Catholic, very high, and Christian also, but Catholic. But more specifically, in the center of the media market. In fact, I'm in a studio at Fox Studios today in Wilkes-Barre. Scranton and Wilkes-Barre are the major media centers of all northeast central Pennsylvania. And of course, where I'm getting at is he made a big deal out of Scranton Joe, about he's a Scranton guy. He came in for recently a funeral of one of his best friends from when he went to St. Paul's School here in Scranton, meaning Joe Biden, President Joe Biden. Well, it's going to be interesting for me to see, because Scranton especially is overwhelmingly Democrat, but Catholic. On two fronts. One, you've kind of disparaged the Catholic faith. Two, we all know what she did as part of what Barack Obama and what Nancy Pelosi, the coup d'etat to get rid of Joe Biden. They kicked him out. So I'm going to be really curious to see how Scranton Democrats respond in the heart of this media market, which would be devastating for Pennsylvania if that goes south. And I'm hearing a lot of Democratic friends resentful about how they mistreated Joe Biden, and also not particularly happy about the Catholic issue. So it's rhetorical. I don't need a response, but I'm just I'm giving you some on the ground here in Pennsylvania. In Scranton Joe's hometown, The reception to say right now of her is lukewarm. In fact, she didn't even come, which is surprising. She sent her husband, was in Scranton a few days ago. But let me talk to you now about something we talked about off camera. I'm seeing poll numbers. There's two issues here, Mike. Let's take the general poll numbers. Right now, according to national polls in the major swing states, President Trump has a lead in almost all of them. And in fact, I want to say all of them. I think Nevada was a straggler, but even now, the latest polls in Nevada have him either even or slightly ahead. And they are small, but they're solid margins. You know, a point, 2 points. A couple are within a point. But here's what I've studied about that, and I'd like your comment on it. You know, why does President Trump underperform in polls? Evidence for that statement is this. In 2016, he was down close to double digits to Hillary Clinton and won. And they were like, wow, how could the polls be so off? In 2020, he was down between 12 and 16 points to Joe Biden. They were calling for a landslide, and it was too close to call for 3 days. In fact, 72,000 voters in 3 states were how close in the Electoral College. So it was a bare loss. They were, again, historically wrong again. I saw a couple of analysts break this down as to why, and here's why. The algorithms of polls, Mike, basically, they kick out voters that don't vote very often. They want the higher, knowing that you're getting reliable information on people they're going to vote. Makes sense. The problem in this study was that Trump voters get kicked out of most polls because a lot of them, Mike, only vote for him. They're disaffected, they're MAGA, they're not happy with the swamp. So when President Trump's on the ballot, they come out to vote for him, but they skip off the other years, which means a lot of those polls don't count them in their tabulations. So what I'm saying is if the president is up a couple of points, he actually might be up 5 to 7 points more in every single state. And I think you're seeing that on the ground by the early voting, aren't we?
Yeah, look, we're very upbeat about the early vote. We're very upbeat about the mail-in voting that's taking place in states like Pennsylvania, North Carolina, even in Michigan and Wisconsin, Georgia, all across the country right now. You know, I would use cautious optimism as the phrase that kind of we're operating under right now. We feel like he consistently underpolls a point or two in every single poll across the country. But the real poll at the end of the day is the votes, right? And so North Carolina, for the first time ever, Donald Trump has a lead in early voting and absentee voting. Georgia, President Trump has a lead. Pennsylvania, we're seeing the Democrat lead cut by 60, 65, 70% versus where it was in 2020 and 2016. And we're seeing similar numbers in Michigan. We're seeing similar numbers in Wisconsin, Arizona, and Nevada. So right now, what we're seeing on the ground with the votes that are there reflects the fact that President Trump, over the course of the last year, has been telling voters it's great if you want to vote early. It's great if you want to vote by mail. It's great if you want to vote on Election Day. What you have to do is make a plan and execute that plan and deliver your vote. The other thing that we're really focused on is it's not enough for our base, for our voters who are going to be out there voting for Donald Trump to just cast the vote. It's not enough. You've got to go out there and you've got to talk with 10 of your family members, your colleagues, your coworkers, your friends, people at your church, and you've got to get them to commit to vote. When every one of our voters goes out and has those conversations, all we're asking for is 5-minute conversations with 10 people that you know and you trust to get them to commit to vote. When that happens, we're going to have a really good November 5th.
There's no doubt. Well, I'm going to give you two indicators. You know, as you look around the landscape, yeah, you have poll numbers and you get deluged on TV with commercials, but I look to actions like that kind of can tell you a story that speak louder than any commercials or words or polls. I'll give you one right here in Pennsylvania. And he's a friend of mine. We've been friends, our families, for a long, long time. Senator Bob Casey. When somebody told me the other day that he was running commercials talking about the policies of President Trump that he voted for and supports, I said, that can't be real. That's got to be a lie. Can't be. Well, Democratic Senator Bob Casey is running commercials in Pennsylvania where he's highlighting not the 98% of the time he voted for the Biden administration and Pelosi, but apparently the few votes, like he's talking about how he supported President Trump's policy on fracking and fossil fuels, and they're important for Pennsylvania. And then he talked about 2 or 3 other issues also relative to the border. Well, that to me, if you needed a signal that they are running from Kamala Harris, that would be one. And by the way, I saw commercials around now once I looked into that, 3 or 4 other senators in swing states that they're trying to defend or they're going to lose the majority. Chuck Schumer's apparently having a real bad time. He had to green light that strategy from on high that, look, we're going to lose unless we start distancing ourselves from Kamala Harris and the radical Democratic programs here in our state. So when those commercials are running, that to me is better than any poll, Mike. I'd like your thoughts.
Well, yeah, and Dave McCormick is going to win that race because Dave is running a truly remarkable campaign right now all across Pennsylvania. He's connecting with Pennsylvania voters, and he has made it very clear he is going to support Donald Trump's America First agenda. But I'm really happy with what we're seeing in Pennsylvania right now across the ground. I was just in Michigan yesterday. I was in Wisconsin with Eric Hovde the day before that. We feel very good about flipping the Senate. We're going to carry West Virginia, obviously. I think we're going to carry Montana. We've got a very strong lead up there right now. But we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to help Dave McCormick. And he is leading now in the polls, which is causing panic, as you know, on the Democratic side of the aisle, certainly causing panic with Bob Casey and his campaign. Look, he cannot hide from his record. He cannot hide from the fact, as you said, that he has consistently voted with Kamala Harris and her administration on every single issue that matters to the Pennsylvania voters. That's why Dave McCormick has surged. We've seen a tremendous movement in that race over the course of the last month. Here in the last 2 weeks, he is going to continue to be out there working every single day. We're also going to expand our majority in the House. We've got a number of really tight races in the congressional races there in Pennsylvania. We feel great about our incumbents. We got an opportunity to pick up a couple of different seats there. And Donald Trump is the one that is leading the way. He is the one right now who has set the America First agenda, and no state matters more than Pennsylvania. When you think about this race, you think about this country, the issues that affect every battleground state affect Pennsylvania. Pennsylvanians want their state to be strong. They want their country to be strong. They want a strong southern border. They want a strong economy. They want a country that is strong enough to protect our interests and our allies all across the border. That's Donald Trump. 4 years in office, he delivered on every single one of those. 4 years in office, Kamala Harris, the Biden administration, they have absolutely collapsed our southern border, let 20 million illegal aliens come across. They have absolutely collapsed our economy. That's why inflation went up to 9%. It's double where it was when Joe Biden took over, and they're bragging about it. And right now, we have a shooting happening right now in Israel, where Iran is not even acting through their proxies anymore. They are firing ballistic missiles directly at them. Russia has invaded Ukraine. They've sent planes over Alaska. They've parked a boat capable of carrying nuclear missiles in Havana Harbor, 90 miles off of our shore. So we are seeing provocative actions around the country because when America is weak, the world is a far more dangerous place. Pennsylvanians know that they've got to be strong on our economy, strong on our national security, and that is going to be Dave McCormick, and that is going to be Donald Trump.
Right. Well, as another example, anecdotal evidence of how bad it's going for the Democrats, right here in this media market, Mike, is a big contested race with Rob Bresnahan against Matt Cartwright. And it was thought to be unthinkable that Cartwright could be challenged. Even in the 2 presidential cycles that President Trump won in 16, he won and lost in 20. He carried that congressional district by double digits, and yet Matt Cartwright won. He is now running commercials talking about how he did not support the Pelosi or the Biden wall or immigration issue, that he's voted against them on that issue and has voted for strengthening the border. So, again, highlighting the change from what's going on with the national team. As I said, the anecdotal evidence is staggering to me.
Yes, absolutely. We feel really good about Bresnahan. We like the rest of our congressionals all across Pennsylvania. We are absolutely going to expand our majority, and we're going to be able to adopt those America First policies. Chuck, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate your service in Pennsylvania, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you so much. Have a good day. In today's View, I will address the rise and fall of the National Democratic Party. Somewhere in the coming winter of their discontent, meaning after November 5th, buried under an avalanche of votes and ice and snow, lies the seeds, hopefully, that in the spring come back to life again, because we need a strong two-party system in this country. I have too many Democratic friends who have left or disavowed the blue party, from national icons like Tulsi Gabbard and Bobby Kennedy to me, and too many Democratic friends to list them all here. I was once a proud Democrat, inspired to the values of the party as epitomized by the late, great former president, John F. Kennedy. When I say I was a Kennedy Democrat, that's what I mean. It is necessary, believe it or not, in 2024 to remind people what those values were a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. The Democratic Party used to be the party of the working class and middle class. They valued people of all races and creeds and genders, whether or not you had a college degree and whether or not you spoke fluent woke speak of the faculty lounges. John F. Kennedy's party did not stigmatize American citizens with labels like deplorables. A Kennedy Democrat had a big tent and welcomed debate and disagreement and did not censor speech. Does anybody think that President Kennedy would ever have nominated a Supreme Court justice who responded to a question about what a woman is with the answer that she didn't know because she was not a biologist? I'm pretty sure a Kennedy administration would not rewrite Title IX to allow biological males to compete with and physically dominate and even beat up women in sports or roam around their locker rooms. I'm fairly certain that the Kennedy administration would never endorse or promote discredited theories like the fact that the Revolutionary War was fought to keep slavery in America, or that if you are born white, you are automatically a racist by virtue of the color of your skin. I wonder if the racist demagogues who spew critical race theory ever studied the actual history of legal immigration in this country. Were all of the millions of white European immigrants, the Irish, the Italians, the Poles, the Germans, and many others too numerous to mention, guilty of white privilege? I can speak myself to the Italian experience, and thanks to my wife, an Irish woman, the Irish experience. And I can tell you that the term white privilege doesn't square with the experiences of those people, or don't they count? They lived in tenements, in squalor, with rats for pets. Many of them died from the disease and infirmities that came with living in those conditions. Pretty much a stretch to get to white privilege there. I'm also pretty sure that President Kennedy would have no use for the postmodernists that have taken over the Democratic Party. You know, those geniuses that don't believe in truths or facts. They believe there are no facts. In that discredited discipline, you have the basis for radical gender ideology. It's the postmodernization that allows a Supreme Court justice to claim she doesn't know what a woman is. Thankfully, one senator mockingly stated in response that he wasn't a veterinarian, but he knew what a dog was. As many of you are aware, I recently met privately with President Trump. One of the topics we discussed was his belief that common sense had left the Democratic Party. I was therefore not surprised when he mentioned it later in his address. And isn't that the truth? A Kennedy administration would not be ordering people, through much hardship, to eliminate all fossil fuel and natural gas production, because they would know that you are condemning older citizens and poor ones to starvation and even death from extreme heat and cold when the cost of energy goes up. You remember views I did on this show referring to the dilemma of heat or eat in the wintertime? By the way, this also impacts the high price of food and directly leads to record inflation. 2/3 of American citizens are living paycheck to paycheck. And the National Democrats want to raise the price of energy? That's the game plan. They've said it. It's in testimony. That's how they're going to cut down because their climate existentialism on the use of fossil fuels. How many people need to die in that effort or suffer in that effort? And then there's the government and academia-sponsored rise of anti-Semitism. We have seen it in elite college presidents of Ivy League institutions contextualizing the intimidation, assault, and exclusion of Jewish students on campuses. After a decade of censorship and canceling speeches from any non-woke perspective, all of a sudden, the First Amendment does apparently matter again. Of course, it really doesn't matter to them. In their DEI departments and bias reporting systems, they have put all kinds of booby traps and landmines in place to destroy the First Amendment. What really mattered were the pro-Palestinian voters in swing states that held their future hold on power in their hands. To them, that is really the context they were talking about. You have indoctrinated Gen Z students shouting encouragement and support for Hamas, an organization that has called for the death of all Jews, and getting away with it without consequence. Senator Chuck Schumer, who is Jewish, by the way, and former Speaker Nancy Pelosi should be ashamed of themselves for calling for moderation in the Israeli response. I don't remember any such cries for moderation or humanitarian concerns in World War II, when we led the charge in America in freeing the European continent from the scourge of Nazism, or in our island-hopping advance on the Empire of Japan, in freeing the Far East from that tyranny. I could go on and on and on about democratic censorship, coddling big tech and big pharma. But by now, I hope you've gotten the point. Now, I hope you understand how profound and troubling the statement is from Bobby Kennedy Jr. that his uncle and father wouldn't recognize today's Democratic Party. Neither do I. It would be easy to forget in my excoriating my former party the importance to our country to have two functioning parties. As I said in the beginning, there aren't too many patriotic Democratic citizens who I believe will move the Democratic Party back to where it has always been, at the center of love for our country, a belief in a God that imbued us with inalienable rights that are not bestowed by the government, but are protected by it. I would hope there are still people who remember Thomas Jefferson and James Madison and will view all Americans as the same without the benefit of intersectionality in identity politics.
Now there's more places you can see The Volpe Report. Watch every Sunday morning at 10:30 a.m. on Fox 56. Or watch on YouTube at The Volpe Report. More ways to watch. Still the same premier public affairs show dedicated to the topics that matter most to Pennsylvanians.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Volpe Report podcast. Be sure to visit our YouTube and Facebook pages for upcoming episodes. You can catch up on the Volpe Report podcast on your favorite podcast provider.